Dear colleagues,
As rise as critic of private members Bill C-234 in our third reading debate. That means for those that are new that I can speak up to 45 minutes, so bear with me. As you know, this bill proposes to amend the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act to grant to farmers an 8 years exemption, not 3 years, in connections with the use of natural gas and propane for grain drying and heating or cooling of farm buildings used for raising livestock or growing crops. The Conservative Party, its leader, and some conservative premiers have positioned this bill as a vanguard to axe the carbon tax. Today, in the House of Commons, on Opposition Day, the Conservative moved the motions urging the Senate to adopt this bill. If this motion is adopted, I understand Senator Plett will resist it, as he did from previous motions similar that were adopted concerning the UNDRIP bills that was sponsored by MP Saganash or the other MP Ambrose that sponsored that bill about judges training, and where he made that speech about the fact that it was unacceptable to have the other house trying to tell us what to do. So we'll know tomorrow, the vote will be tomorrow afternoon after a question period, and we'll know the day after what Senator Plett thinks of it. Clearly, there are the views that the price on carbon should not be part of Canada's framework for climate action. This is a policy decision that I respect but do not share. An increasing price on carbon is a strong incentive to reduce emissions by using more efficient equipment or switching to greener source of energy. From a recent piece published in The Economist just recently, on October 1st, 2023, it says, I quote, "If global warming is to be limited, the world must forget fossil fuels as fast as possible. That much almost everyone agrees upon." I say almost everyone. How to do this is the complicated part. Economists have long favored putting a price on carbon, a mechanism Europe introduced in 2005. Doing so allows the market to identify the cheapest unit of greenhouse gas to cut and to fight climate change at the lowest cost. Another fact is that Canada is not on its way to meet its undertakings under the Paris Accord. Moreover, last week, scientists released data showing the world briefly crossed the 2-degree warning red line on November 17. As stated in Senator Harder's closing speech on Bill C-12, Canadian Net Zero Emission Accountability Act in 2021, 2 years ago, and I think these words are still full of meanings. And I quote, "With the challenge of climate change, we live at the most consequential time in human history. We must not be broken. We must not be the broken link in the chain. If we don't cooperate toward the shared and necessary objectives of saving the environment, we will fail ourselves, our children, our grandchildren, and all generations. We will fail the miraculous creatures with whom we share this planet. We are now their only hope and their only threat. We must choose to do better." In the Senate, he said, "We should contribute to this goal in the critical years ahead, and for the sake of our grandchildren, we should and must be bold." End of quote. I will now move to Bill C-234. Colleagues, unfortunately, the case for Bill C-234 is sustained by the repetitions of falsehoods and the repetitions of talking points such as farmers are stewards of the land, and therefore do not need to endure policies to ensure a greener economy, because they will go for a toward economy, a greener economy by themselves, because contrary to what economists state, they will by themselves go for the different ways to do things that might be more expensive. Today, I will address 8 false arguments repeated by well-financed lobbies. First, that Bill C-234 aims to correct an inadvertent omission in the Price on Carbon Act in 2018, but by not exempting natural gas and propane after having exempted gasoline and fuel used on farms. Second, that carbon pricing drives inflation and makes food produced by farmers unaffordable. Third, that carbon pricing has made the overall cost of natural gas and propane an unbearable burden for farmers. 4, that significant efficiencies are unavailable in grain drying with current technology. 5, that alternatives and efficiencies are unavailable for barn heating or cooling with existing technology contrary to the heating of other type of buildings. 6, that the Senate amendment to the bill will automatically kill the bill. 7, that this bill will not weaken Canada's carbon pricing framework and our plan for climate action. And 8, that removing the price on carbon will incentivize farmers to invest these savings to reduce emissions. I will conclude, based on the evidence made before the committee, by proposing an amendment to the bill to remove the exemptions for barn heating and cooling. As a matter of fact, even the House of Commons sponsor of the bill, MP Lobb, confirms that more efficiencies and alternatives are readily available for heating and cooling of farms, buildings. The first falsehood is that Bill C-234 aims to correct the inadvertent omission of natural gas and propane at the time of adoption of the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act in 2018. Since the bill exempts gasoline and fuel used on farms, which represents about 97% of the carbon emissions of Canadian farmers. This claim has been repeated in this very chamber. At the Agriculture Committee, officials from Finance Canada and Environment Canada explained that the federal carbon pricing system was based on BC's carbon pricing already in place at the time. To be effective, the government's objective was to apply carbon pricing as broadly as possible, with targeted relief. One of these targeted relief was to grant an exemptions of the price on carbon for gasoline and diesel because as long as used for eligible farming machinery, such as these huge tractors and combines we often see in the land, on the roads, in the countryside, or in the middle of the fields. They were exempted because there's no real alternative to propel this type of engine. At least there was none in 2018. I'm not aware of any combine moving by electricity yet. Electric cars are in the progress of becoming the trend, but there's no trend for combines so far or for tractors. The use of natural gas and propane is used mostly for heating of buildings, and it was a different matter. And it was excluded as well in BC as the government policy here. So it's not an omission. We're not dealing with the same thing. We're dealing either with machinery or we're dealing with heatings or cooling of buildings. They don't use the same stuff. I don't know of a farm using gasoline to heat up the barn. Furthermore, as we all know by now, the government has the power to exempt the fuel by regulation, which power has been used recently to exempt home heating oil for houses. Despite Bill C-234 and its predecessor, the government has refused to use that power for granting exemptions for natural gas and propane, even if limited to farmers, confirming that the policy choice was not an omission, but a policy choice. The second falsehood is the claim that carbon pricing drives inflation and makes food unaffordable. Canada's inflation rate is currently at 3.8%, while it is at 3.7% in the US, 4.3% in the European Union, 4.9% in France, and 6.7% in the UK. Thus, it seems that we are doing better than many other developed countries. Maybe our country is not broken after all. On September 8th, Tiff Macklem, the governor of the Bank of Canada, indicated that about 0.15% of the Canadian inflation rate can be attributed to the carbon price. To put it differently, the increase on the price of carbon this year accounts for an extra 30 cents on the $200 grocery bill. If you want to go back to the time of its introduction of the Price on Carbon Act in 2019, it now accounts for an extra $1.20 on the $200 grocery bill. For that very reason, University of Calgary economist Trevor Thom affirms that the carbon tax is responsible for less than 1% of grocery price increases. I'm not saying it, it's an economist who's saying it. And it's the governor of the Bank of Canada who's saying it. But I know that maybe he would be fired for having said that, if there's a change of government. Repeating ad nauseam that the carbon price is responsible for the very sad inability of many Canadians to eat properly doesn't turn a falsehood into the truth. However, it may explain the party that wants to axe the tax would like to axe the head of the governor of the Bank of Canada. Responsible politicians should focus on the real causes of the rapidly increasing cost of food and life in Canada and find it where it is, not in the carbon tax. The third false claim is that carbon pricing has made the cost for farmers of using natural gas and propane unaffordable for the care of their animals, especially poultry. Mais de quoi parle-t-on exactement?
But what exactly are we talking about? According to figures provided by Statistics Canada and the Parliamentary Budget Officer, spending on heating fuels represents less than 1% of farm operating expenses. To be very precise, in 2019, it represented 0.9% of spending and 0.8% in 2020, and the same percentage in 2021. With a disparity depending on the type of farm, it's true. So 4 to 5% on average for greenhouse production and 0.4% for potatoes in Prince Edward Island or oilseeds and cereal crops. That is why for greenhouse production, the government created an 80% exemption for greenhouses on the carbon tax to reduce their cost from 4 to 5% to 1% or less. In short, greenhouse producers are taxed on only 20% of their consumption for the carbon tax to take into account their unique situation. And of course, we cannot forget that these producers benefit from reimbursable tax credits which from legislation passed 2 years ago. It is also important to remember that the carbon tax is not linked to the market price of fuels. The price on pollution is linked solely to the level of dioxin produced. So whether the price of gas is 10 cents or 90 cents a cubic meter, the price of pollution in a fiscal year will be the same per ton. We've heard a lot about poultry producers who are said to be the biggest consumer of natural gas for heating their chicken coops. The largest share of poultry producers are found in Ontario. Furthermore, they are also producers that operate in the supply management system, which allows them or guarantees them their income independent of their costs and spending. That was not also said by all the lobbyists that you've seen, who said that all farmers of Canada were against C234. When I met an organization that said they were against a C234, but they are even counted in the numbers used by the Carbon Alliance to say the number of farmers that support the bill. Another lie. So here's a case of a producer in Ontario who was kind enough to send me his production figures. I met over 20 associations, and he sent numbers concerning the volume of natural gas consumed per kilogram of meat and the price of pollution paid since 2020. While the price of pollution for this producer rose from $15,000 to $27,000 between 2020 and 2023, he paid $37,000 less for his natural gas this year than last. In fact, the price of gas fell from 32 cents in October 2022 to 15 cents in October 2023. Did you see the price of chicken dropping in the stores?
Others has seen the cost of natural gas decrease substantially in 2023 and ends up in a better position by over $10,000 to $20,000 before any refundable tax credit that will further improve their position. The costs of energy for poultry producers cannot justify an increase in the price of chicken that we consume. If the price of chicken and other supply management products, such as milk and eggs, went up this year, it's not because of the cost of natural gas, with or without carbon pricing. Of the 20 and more organizations I met with that urged me to support this bill and to oppose the other bill on supply management instantly, not one, even one, thought many of them are very large and very useful. Sorry, of the 20 or more organizations I met with their lobbyists or without their lobbyists, even though many of them are very powerful and resourceful, having money to do research, none was able to provide me with figures on the rebates received by their members in 2022, just last year. No, they don't know. Oh, well, the only numbers I got is that it's not enough to meet the price on carbon. Of course, when I asked the price of gas, no answer. When I asked them, well, you can deduct the carbon tax from your expenses, isn't it? Oh, yes, yes, yes. So how much does it cost net at the end, after the rebate and after the deduction for taxes? None was able to provide an answer. And they are paid lobbyists, hundreds of thousands of dollars, sending you all these flyers and leaflets with pictures and nice colors. Find the numbers in these leaflets. You won't find any. The only thing they say is going to cost to farmers $1 billion, in small print at the bottom of the page, between now and 2030. Not this year, because this year it's costing $73 million to the farmers, not $1 billion. But that, they prefer to hide. The current rebate mechanism, The current rebate mechanisms enables returns of the proceeds of the tax on carbon collected in a province to the farmers of that province. As you know, maybe now, a province, this means that $100 million was returned to farmers in 2021, 2022, and $120 million was returned to farmers in 22, 23. It's even more than what was collected because of the time taxes was collected before the rebate came into place, so there was some money accumulated. So this year is a good year. If these rebates needs to be more precisely targeted, as was suggested at the ACFO committee in its carefully drafted observations that some people thought was wise to scrap, this could be done maybe in a better way and we return more to those that are using more energy than some that have converted and are no longer using energy. The fourth false premise of Bill C-234 is that significant efficiencies are not available in grain drying with current technology. We know this premise is untrue from the Agriculture Committee's study. Even MP Ben Lobb, the sponsor of that bill in the House of Commons, said before our committee, I quote, "Yes, there are more efficient grain dryers now," end of quote. Professor Chandra Singh from Lethbridge College indicated the reductions of 30% on average is achievable in grain drying with more efficient equipment. Ian Boxell, to which our friends on the other side refer all the time, president of the Agricultural Producers Association of Saskatchewan, indicated that he bought a new grain dryer last year to replace his 1974 model, achieving substantial savings in energy cost. When I asked him about 30%, he said a bit less. The website of a company called Flamand Agricultures, with 11 locations in Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba, advertised the NECO grain dryers. I quote, "The NECO mixed flow grain dryer is one of the most efficient dryers on the market, maximizing the test weight of dry grain and lowering your energy bill. NECO dryers have unequaled energy efficiency, saving up to 20 to 30% on fuel cost," end of quote. Finally, even the website of the Department of Agriculture for the province of Ontario also refers to new dryers as representing a reduction of 30% of volume of natural gas required, with even higher savings possible by reclaiming heat from dryer exhaust air, reducing costs up to 40%. Senators, the premise that efficiencies are unavailable for farmers for grain drying, and thus that the price signal to incentivize emissions reductions is therefore pointless and punitive, is plainly false. I repeat, plainly false. It is true that the purchase price of a dryer can be expensive, for example, $150,000. That was quoted by Senator Batters, plus installation costs, I will concede. But she didn't say that it is an amortizable cost. It's an equipment that can be depreciated over years, 10 years. And then that allows the price to be deducted against your income, net income. And I'm not speaking about programs that exist in many provinces to finance and assist farmers that want to buy this equipment, including federal programs that are so popular that they are running out of money. And that one other observation of our committee was that the government should increase substantially these programs because the farmers want to have this equipment. They want to embrace the change, but they need the little push from these programs. Moreover, if Bill C-234 were to be adopted, we have learned in committee that it will have a perverse outcome on grain drying markets in Ontario and elsewhere in some other provinces. Since the carbon tax will continue to apply to commercial grain dryers. In Ontario, more than 60% of the producers of grains are using these commercial dryers to dry their grains. They will not have access to that bill. But the 30% or 40% that is outside will have access to it, having its dryers, on-farm dryers. So Senator Wells said, that's fine. You should all buy on-farm dryers. That would be the answer. They will all get the rebate. Well, before the committee, it was said that the commercial dryers are more efficient than the individual, smaller, on-farm dryers. So what is being proposed as a climate change policy is that we have more dryers, less efficient on farms than using commercial dryers, and dislocate a business which is being used quite important in Ontario and in some western provinces. Let's now speak of heating of farms buildings. Senators, compared to grain drying, alternatives and efficiencies are already available. In fact, alternatives or efficiencies in barn heating and cooling includes better insulation, in-floor heating, geothermal heat pumps, air source heat pumps, energy-efficient ventilation fans, biomass heating, solar walls, LED lightings, more natural lighting, light-colored heat-reflective pans, and so forth. We're familiar with some of those options for homes and other buildings located in Canada. The House of Commons sponsor of Bill C-234, MP Lobb, who was present today to see our vote, confirmed this point in committee. He said, and I quote, "If you look at the heatings of barns, it is moving lockstep with the innovations that are heating a home, a commercial building, or an industrial building, because it only makes financial sense," end of quote. Tom Green from the David Suzuki Foundation said, I quote, there are ever more examples of farms that are reducing their fossil fuel consumption and improving energy efficiency. For instance, a poultry farm in Linden, Alberta, has a 175 kilowatt rooftop system. They sell from time to time even energy to the electric distributor. In another case, a poultry barn built with a high-efficiency thermal envelope reduced energy consumption by 83% per ton of eggs. End of quote. This situation is the reason that I've moved an amendment of the committee to exclude barn heating and cooling from the exemptions of Bill C-234, rather than to legislate on a false premise. This amendment was declined at the House of Commons Committee on Agriculture with a vote of 6-5. However, the Senate Agriculture Committee adopted it with a vote of 7-6 and one abstention, the GRO representative. I will again propose this amendment today. This amendment will maintain the financial incentive to reduce emissions from raising livestock in barns by investing in alternative or efficient barn heating or cooling, an option available right now. In the bigger picture, this amendment will also discourage other sectors from seeking to exempt their economic activities that involve heating buildings, such as meat processing plants, fruit warehouses, food distribution centers, and so on. Most likely through their private members' bill. So when it was said in committee that they were asking for an amendment to cover also the commercial dryer operations, many senators said, no, let's wait. Let's pass the bill without amendment. We'll have another bill later to cover that. So we know that if this exemption is granted, we're going to have people knocking on this door the week after. Exemptions should be limited to very exceptional cases and not a way to axe the tax one step at a time. I I now turn to false argument number 6 about what will happen if senators dares to amend Bill C-234. On November 1st, in the National Post, they quoted Senator Wells saying, quote, "Because the government controls the pace and placement of bills, it will just die a slow, lonely death." I like the poetry, especially after the steps we saw late last week in carving out exemptions on home heating fuel, end of quote. Well, this is unfortunately inaccurate. If the Senate amends Bill C-234, a message will be sent to the other place to acquaint the MPs of this amendment. The message will enter automatically on the House of Commons orders of precedence for private members' business. This is a much more fair, timely, and transparent system than what we have in the Senate when we're dealing with private bills, especially when some people don't like them, with regularly scheduled debates and votes on the list of a maximum of 30 items, be private bills, motions, or message from the Senate. If this bill were to be returned to the other place tonight, it will become item 25 on the list of items that are waiting to be debated at the regular scheduled time. Moreover, MPs can always trade an item up the list with somebody who's lower on the list to expedite debate. On the current order of precedence, 8 conservative items are between number 1 and number 25, including several conservative Senate public bills with no limit in the rules of trading that can be done. Maybe one of the private senators' bill could wait to have this so important bill to move ahead. Accordingly, this bill, if sent back to the other place, will move, and the government will have nothing to say about it because it's not a government bill. But we said at the same time, don't do that. Why? They said that there's multi-party support at the other place for the bill. So if they have it back, they will react so swiftly, and they will reaffirm their support for that bill, unless they fear that maybe the support is evaporating. And maybe that's another lie. We've been told, support that because it's coming from the House of Commons. It's the will of the elected people. You know, they've done their job. So just put the rubber stamp on it. Of course, when such a debate will happen at the other place, amendments could be made. They could accept the amendment of the Senate. They could refuse it. And we will differ as we do when we get back the message, because this is the way it goes between unelected and elected House. To illustrate, in 2017, the Senate amended a private bill, C-224, called the Good Samaritan Drug Overdose Act. That bill was previously unanimously adopted by the other place. The bill was also especially urgent because it proposed measures designed to save lives in case of overdose. And indeed, it did save lives since its adoption. The Senate amended the bill to expand the scope of the immunity, if you call 911, in order to save more lives. The other place welcomed the Senate amendment and voted to support the amendment within 1 month. This chamber did not consider an amendment with lives at stake to be an undue risk. If we can do it when the life of people is at stake, we can do it when we speak about exemptions on natural gas or propane to heat a barn. Furthermore, I'm intrigued by what we've been urged to do so fast, because it was representing the overwhelming majority of the House. I know that there is a motion pending before the House today, debated today, and will be voted upon tomorrow. Maybe we'll find out that the consensus, the kind of multi-party wide support is evaporating. Maybe not. They will deal with the bill if they are still supportive of it, and we will get it fast. And don't worry, nobody is drying grain anymore. The season is over. Colleagues, the 7th false claim is that this bill will not weaken Canada's carbon pricing framework in our plan for climate action. At the first meeting of the Agriculture Committee, Senator Wells, the sponsor, said, I quote, "I want to be clear. The essence of this bill is not to challenge the validity of the carbon tax as a whole. Climate change is an undeniable reality, and remedial measures are crucial in our fight against it, and it is our duty to ensure that these measures are applied fairly. The proposed amendments to the Greenhouse Gas Pollution Pricing Act, as encapsulated in this bill, are not sweeping changes, and they don't challenge the concept of the tax. The concept of the tax is a price on carbon, I remind. They are targeted and very narrow, end of quote. Colleagues, I find that statement surprising. As said on the website of the Conservative Party, this bill is a vanguard effort to axe the tax. And it won't, and it is say, that's the agenda. So let's not sugarcoat the bill and say, no, we're for climate change. Yes, we're for change. We'll do something. But not this. We'll just remove that group. Next group will be following, knocking on the door the week after, as I said. And incidentally, even if that bill were to be adopted, which I don't suggest to do now, but to return to the House of Commons, I'm anxious to see the impact on your grocery bill when you go to the grocery next month. The last falsity is about the need to leave more money with farmers to incentivize them to invest in a greener economy. According to that argument, the rising price on carbon is not a financial incentive, while the lack of one will be. Quite frankly, I fail to understand the point unless all the economists in the world, or at least the majority of them, are wrong. Finally, this brings me to the fairness argument that is in the mind of many of us, as it should be. As we all know, since the report of the ACFO Committee, 3 important events have happened. First, on October 26, the Prime Minister announced a 3-year exemption of the price on carbon for home heating oil. Like Senator Simons, I was rather puzzled by this announcement. After some research, and I now do understand that at current prices, it can cost 4 times more to generate the same amount of heat with oil as with natural gas, that the price of oil has increased significantly over the last few years, contrary to the price of gas that went down, and finally, that this expensive source of energy is mostly used by low-income households, not only in Atlantic Canada, but mostly in Ontario and in Quebec, if you look at the numbers. As Senator Ringuette exposed it earlier today, this exemptions is not targeted at one region, it's not targeted at a group of people that are using a product that went up the roof over the years, is not efficient, is not generating enough power to compare to gas, and time has come to replace that by heat pumps and other source of energy, and the government is moving in that direction. Was it necessary to give a 3 years exemption on top? To me, it looks like a faux pas, but it should not be an excuse to throw away the baby with the bathwater. Second, the second event that has happened since the report is that the government has repeatedly said that since the announcement, there will be no further exemptions to the price on carbon. It also has reaffirmed its strong commitment to the policy of a price on carbon and to do whatever is necessary to meet Canada's undertaking under the Paris Accord. I know that many here, like me, believe that these are necessary steps in the fight against the climate crisis. Third, on November 6, the House of Commons defeated a Conservative motion calling for an exemption for all home heating fuel. Why should we now adopt a bill that provides an exemptions to heat all kinds of barns and farm buildings, including those farmers operating in supply management systems that guarantees them good income, while refusing a similar exemptions for all home heating? It's a good question, I think. Maybe cows are more valuable than humans. Furthermore, can we adopt a bill that proposes exemptions for heating of all kinds of farm buildings for a minimum of 8 years, while the limited exemptions for home heating for home heating oil is limited to 3 years. Tell me, where's the logic? Considered in isolation or together with recent developments, this bill, 234, remains a bad bill, resting on many false premises. In my view, Parliament should not legislate on a false premise or many false premises. Passing this bill in its current form will amount to us being scared to do our constitutional role. This private bill is not a case where we should abdicate our responsibility, especially towards a private bill, in the face of pressure campaigns and even threats. Senators, as always, we should do the right thing. In this case, it means returning this bill to the other place to let elected MPs from the 3 opposition parties that made its adoption possible, despite the contrary view of the government, to act together and to tell us exactly how they see and how they want to manage the things to be coherent. Why should they grant farmers 8 years and should grant to some people 3 years to heat their home? Again, before I move the amendment, I will end by quoting MP Lobbs when he spoke about heating of barns. If you look at the heating of barns, he said, it is moving lockstep with the innovations that are heating a home, commercial buildings, or industrial building, because it only makes financial sense. End of quote. There's no rationale for providing exemptions for heating of farms and other farm buildings. Therefore, with this amendment, let us legislate based on facts. Let us draw a line against axing the tax. We will improve Bill C-234 and invite all MPs, including Liberals and ministers, to put in place a coherent approach instead of poking holes in an important part of our climate plan. Therefore, I move that Bill C-234 be not now read a third time, but that it be amended. A, in clause 1, on page 1, by replacing line 4 to 15 with the following. 1. Paragraph C of the definition of eligible farming machinery in Section 3 of the Greenhouse Gas Polluting Pricing Act is replaced by the, end of quote, on page 2 by deleting line 1 to 10. B, in clause 2 on page 2 by replacing line 22 with the following, quote, 2, bracket 1, subsections 1, bracket 2.1, close bracket, and bracket 5, end of quote. Will be easier to read on the piece of paper, but will look probably as technical as what I just said. But this is the translations in legislative terms of what I said. It means making a carve-out in that bill to remove heatings and coolings of barns and other farm buildings, because it makes no sense. And because humans' lives are not exempted except in the very limited case of home heating oil, and therefore the logic is not there. And if we are ready to legislate on false premises and in an illogical way because we fear the pressures from farmers, because we fear the threats from people, I say we will then abdicate our responsibility, and this Senate will not be the new Senate. It will be back to the old days where nobody cared about the Senate. Thank you very much.